Thank you, thank you. So sorry about the delay that we started in, even though I understand it's Greek maybe time. Um, my computer broke the system, or the system broke my computer, and it wouldn't show anything. So I have no idea what these slides are going to look like, but I will not apologize for that. We're being agile, right? Good. So it's amazing to be here, and it's amazing to be here after hearing people like Alistair yesterday, because one of the things that it drove home for me is that transformation is not so much about technology and things that we make, et cetera, but transformation, like this definition, is about changing mindset. It's about working in different ways. It's about bringing people on a journey that allows us to go, yes, faster, but also in a much more thoughtful way. However, the counterpart to this definition is something like this. It says that every transformation is a little bit like the first of the year when you want to go to the gym. And you say, you're ready, I'm ready, I'm ready to change my body. And we gear up, and then we get exactly the same results that we would get when we go to the gym. Nothing. So, because like Alistair, I believe in the power of stories, I want to tell you a little bit of a transformation story. Because the thing that is striking me is that much as many of us are in the process of changing organization, changing the way we work, et cetera, things don't always go as we plan them. And I'm really curious to understand why that is, and that's what I want to share with you today. So, for most of you in this room, this thing over here means photography. You know, photography is digital, is something that we share, something that people can like and comment, doesn't have those god-awful dates printed at the bottom. For people my generation, photography is this. This is how we grew up, with film cans that you put into the camera, being very careful about not exposing them to light, and then you took them to the shop and some magic happened and you got back these printed square papers. Now, Kodak, these film rolls are from Kodak, and Kodak was the biggest film producer in the world. In the 80s, early 80s, words of this new thing, digital photography, started going around the industry. And Kodak decided to commission a study. They were very switched on. They commissioned a study to figure out whether there was something to digital photography or not. It was about 1982. Now, their chief marketing officer was an Italian-American gentleman by the name Michael Barabba. He got the study back and went to his stakeholders, like we do. Alistair talked about good news and bad news yesterday. And he said, I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news is that digital photography is here to stay. It's a thing, and it will become big. The good news, though, is even though we are in the film industry, we've got about 10 years lead time to prepare. It's not going to be a thing before 10 years. And his stakeholders told him exactly what we hear every day. Ah, that's cute. But we're in the film business, so we continue with film. So now, we all know that Kodak is not a household brand right now. There's no Kodak digital camera. There's no Kodak DSLRs. There's none of that. What not all of us know is that in 1996, the first ever digital camera were made by Kodak, and it looked like this. So if you look here, if this thing works, it had this little viewfinder that allowed you to see the shot and decide how many copies you wanted printed. And that was the thing. They did make a digital camera, but because their business model was film, they made a digital camera with film, which of course defeats the point of having a digital camera, doesn't it? Now, it sounds silly, but it can be explained. I mean, these were very smart, very well-educated people. And the way we can explain it is by using math. I don't know, how many of you have studied math in university? Oh, excellent. So you know what this is. So this is a mathematical concept called local optimum versus global optimum. In the local optimum type of scenario, we look for the best possible solution to a problem within a set of neighboring solutions. So we need to fix photography. We're going to be looking at things that remain around the film domain, where the global optimum is the best possible solution among all possible solutions, is what we call nowadays thinking outside the box, innovating. So Kodak, of course, looked in the local optimum, solved the problem in the immediate, but the long-term consequences were that as a company, Kodak doesn't exist anymore. And the thing is that it doesn't exist anymore. Again, as I said, not because they were stupid, not because they weren't thinking, but just because they were following processes and schemas and ways of thinking that were the ones that they were used to. And this idea of process is really, really interesting if you work in a large organization, but even if you work in a small one, chances are that you have manuals or handbooks or a thing that defines the step that you need to follow to achieve a certain outcome. And in an industry, that is good. Process is really seductive, and that's why when you go and do your Agile thing and you work with Agile coaches, your manager is always going to ask you, how does it work? What is it that you do? Break down the steps for me. And the reason for that is that process brings very seductive near-term outcomes. What that means is that if I am being measured on an activity that can be illustrated in a linear process, then I can be rewarded for that. And I can get a bonus. And depending on the industry in which you work, bonuses are a very real thing. And it's such a real thing that spans every domain, that there is this complexity expert back in England. I can share his name, but he goes by Complexity Whales on Twitter. He has created this equation that he calls the Heisenberg hug that says effective that the tiniest physical measurement is likely to appear bigger than something that's much, much more important. Now, think about process, think about steps, think about measurement, and think about lead time when you're asked to deliver a thing, when you're asked to deliver a project. We measure in ever-decreasing intervals. Things happen very, very quickly. Your measurement is in cycles of 3 months. Well, Complexity Whales talks about the organizational Goldilocks zone and talks about how, this is very complex, but I will share the slides and we will have time to digest it, how a cycle is about 4 years. And it takes 4 years to get to that spot, like in the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that was just right. If we measure at cycles of 3 months, we can never hit that just right spot. And our management techniques aren't helping us either. You know, they're so focused on the tactical, on the doing, on the things, on the unit of things that you're going to deliver that they are not supporting. In fact, of all the transformation initiatives that are treated like projects, that are measured in really small cycles, about 70% fail. And those companies do not recover. And it's not, if we go back to the Kodak thing, it's not because people don't care. What happens, in addition to going faster, companies do get bigger. And as we get bigger, and as we get stakeholders that are more and more, and shareholders that are more and more invested in the economical part of the equation, what happens is that we become risk averse and we don't take chances anymore. Now, in my, I will not say the number of years because then it will tell you how old I am, but in my many years in working in industry, I have identified about 3 archetypes that I see companies that go through transformation follow. The first one is what is called the fearless leader. Now, you know how this worked in America. It's not working so well, is it? We take someone, it's a little bit like the knight in shining armor, someone that has a really high profile, that comes from the outside, that knows nothing about our domains, but somehow they're gonna take our company and rescue it from itself. Does it work? Not really. So that doesn't work, so what do? We do skunkworks, except we don't call it skunkworks, we call it innovation. So skunkworks was something that was done by Lockheed Martin during the war. They were to deliver a new airplane. They put engineers, gave them money, tools in a hangar, in a corner. Sounds familiar? And then they came out with this plane really fast. It's what we do in our companies. In enterprise, we wall off a floor, put bean bags, ping pong tables. We put really cool people that don't have to wear what other people have to wear. We give them money, we give them technology, and we say, have an idea. That doesn't work either. And if by any chance that works, it's not scalable. It's not something that you can reproduce. It's a one-hit wonder. So companies do the third thing that everybody does. And they call in the consultants. And I hear some chuckles, so I think you guys have an idea of what I'm talking about. So one year is a big I will not name names, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but one year is the one with the red logo. One year is the one with the green logo. The following year is the one with the blue logo. And they all come. And the reality is that consultants are good. They really know their work. But they take this cookie cutter approach to things. So they suggest the same thing to everybody. And B, and this is the real problem, when they leave, after chucking specifications and PowerPoints that cost a fortune, the knowledge goes away with them because they come in, they do their analysis, they write their things, and then they leave. And that domain expertise that they develop is never, ever transferred back into the organization. Now, if you think about your average CEO, managing director, et cetera, these people are really, really smart. Why do they keep making the same decisions all the time? Alistair was talking about decisions, and I will talk about decisions too. Why do they keep making the same decision over and over and over? The book you see in the back, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, is the book that every designer and product owner I know claims to have read. It's not very many people who've read it cover to cover. It's very dense. Oh, yeah, I'm here. I struggle with it at times, but it's really, really good. And it gave me an idea, together with another colleague, give me the best explanation that I can provide as to why these kind of things happen, and then we will get to what we can do instead. So in 1960, there was an organizational psychologist called McGregor, who loved to run experiments. And he ran experiments in the workplace. And part of the experiments were based on this Kahneman theory of System 1 and System 2. It's what System 1, Kahneman said, is the system in which we are going on autopilot almost. I am walking, and it's instinctive for me to walk and breathe and talk at the same time, and I'm moving my hands, etc., etc. But it's also automatic, and because I am so used and I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, I could trip here or I could jump down here. You probably don't want that, but I could do that. But it's fast and it's easy. System 2, on the other hand, is the system that we like to say we're in most of the time. It's deliberate, it's conscious, it's intentional. It's also tremendously hard. Imagine if I'm standing here and now in my head I'm going like, okay, I'm going to turn 90 degrees. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and now I'm going to move my hand, and I'm going to count my breath, and I'm going to move this other hand. Oh my God, it's exhausting, right? So the reality is that we are in System 1 most of the time. And because it's automatic, it also makes us make automatic decision and think automatically. For instance, if I know that Ben sitting there started reading at 4-year-old, if someone asks me to guess what Ben's GPA in school was, I would probably say it was very high, because I know a piece of information about Ben. Automatically I think that he must be really smart, have gotten good grades in school. Now, when you apply that to the workplace, we make decisions and we think, we consider stuff in exactly the same way. So I was talking about McGregor running these experiments, and he had managers listening in to other managers' meetings. And then he analyzed how people thought and talked about things and came up with these two theories. Theory X is the one that we now call command and control, where we think we cannot trust people, we think that everybody is lazy, they need to be micromanaged, they need to be told exactly what to do, process, right? So it goes perfect with the organization of our companies, where Theory Y talks about how people are self-motivated, people take enjoyment, and they can be trusted, they can be autonomous, they have initiative, etc., etc. When put all these things together and we look at them through what was called a ladder of inference, our way of looking at reality, we realize that we look at reality, we select some facts, we interpret them, we make assumptions, jump to conclusion, develop beliefs, and then we act on the back of all those things. Psychological studies are really interesting to me. I mean, it's part of my background, but it's also really interesting. And so if we take all this information and we look at what Maslow has said when he had developed his theory of needs, and was talking about how people in the workplace, outside of the workplace, have some very basic needs and progressively need to realize as people doing the things that we do because they make us feel good, they give us a sense of identity. When we put all these things together, we realize that work actually isn't as transactional as the people around us want to think. Work for human beings is actually quite natural. It's a little bit like playing. It's the thing that we do. We do the job that we do because, yes, we have to pay the bills, but also because we we derive enjoyment, we derive a sense of identity from it. If you look at yourselves, when you go on holiday, say you have a 3-week holiday, the first week maybe yes, you do nothing, you're on the beach, drinking, eating, chatting to friends, and then you start getting fidgety. And you start, oh, that thing needs to be painted. Oh, I got the laundry right there. So in an industry that has evolved from the industrial era where we had assembly lines where each of us had to perform a certain tasks in order to then deliver a finished product that was quantifiable, doesn't really function anymore for people like us. I mean, we are what Peter Drucker called knowledge workers. And knowledge workers, the concept of knowledge work, it's really interesting because its primary characteristic is that it is absolutely non-deterministic. That means that when we start, we do not know what is going to happen. Knowledge work is also characterized by autonomy. It's characterized by research, by discovery. Does it sound familiar? Do you see where, this whole Agile thing fits in? And it can be measured. It cannot be counted the way we count units in an assembly line. And what makes this old mentality, this old way of thinking about work, even more laughable is the fact that not only we are knowledge workers, but we work in complex adaptive systems. And complex adaptive systems are systems that are equally as non-deterministic as knowledge work. Things keep changing. This room is a complex adaptive system. What is happening right now is determined by everything that you as the element of the system and me and the furniture and the acoustic put together. If one person enters the room, that system is changed. If one person leaves the room, the system has completely different properties. Now, this idea of using systems theory and complexity theory in redesigning the way we work, in rethinking about how we effectively change what we're trying to do, is not easy. And it's even more difficult to sell it inside an organization. So what I do generally is I show this video. Oh.
Recently that 457 different automobiles are available in the United States. Let's buy one of each and bring them to the
Okay.
garage. Let's then hire 200 best.
So there's no sound?
Let's just take a simple example.
All right. I don't want to wait for the sound to be fixed. Effectively, this is Dr. Russell Acuff, and while he's hilarious, what he's saying in this video is that if you want to build the best automobile in the world, the best car in the world, one of the things that you could do is go out, buy all the cars that are made in the world. From each car, you take the best part. Say the Mercedes has the best engine, the Volvo has the best airbag, BMW has the best braking system. So you get the best part from each car, and then you put them all together. When you put them all together, do you get a car? No, you don't. And the reason why you don't get a car is because the parts do not fit. If the parts do not fit, anything that the system is trying to achieve is not going to be realized. In fact, a system is much more than the sum of its parts. It is an indivisible whole. And it loses its essential property when parts are taken away. When we take the braking system from a BMW, the car is not going to break and you're going to die. If I take a person from a company that is essential, that dynamic will change. The system is going to change. Now, we work in complex systems, we do knowledge work, we work in systems of people. And yesterday, I did ask a question precisely about that. I asked Alistair if you were in his Q&A sessions, said, we all know what needs to be done, but we also know that when we go and try to implement Agile, especially in large organizations during transformation activities, Agile gets commoditized. How do you stop that? And Alistair said, you make the organization see the people. And the way the organization sees the people looks a little bit like this. People are our most important asset. It all begins with talent. We need to win the war with talent. Oh my God, we're so violent. Leadership matters more than leader. So in a construct like this, how do you make the organization see the people? So this is how the organization sees the people. It's boxes and arrows, and it's very neat, and it's very organized. It's a process itself, isn't it? And if you look closely, at the very top, people are super happy. And then as you go down, things start to change a little more. And this is just the way the organization sees the people. What happens in reality looks a little bit more like this. There are all these relationships, there's someone who's selling drugs, they have kids at the same school, there are bribes, oh my God, there is an affair here, and then there is someone who you never see, but somehow they have all the power, right? So when Alistair says you make the organization see the people, what they see is the previous slide. It's this one. They don't see this one. But these are the ones that we want to carry with us. These are the ones that, understand, reflect, iterate, develop, and effectively try to change things. What's even worse is that because we really like those measures, because they give us our cash bonuses, is that we, when we look at potential and performance, organizations always focus here, right? This area where we don't see potential, where we don't understand the performance, and we don't see the potential because we don't understand it, gets absolutely excluded. And, this is management theory 101. Who do you focus on when you want to invest in your people? You focus on the executives, or you focus on leadership or high potential. This is probably 10% of your employees. And if this is what you focus on, if this is what you invest, you're going to end up with a team of people that play the same role. Now, soccer, football is the big thing in Greece, right? If you only have goalies on your team, they might be the better goalies on the planet, but who's going to win that match? Someone else. But somehow we focus, when we talk about transforming, when we talk about our leadership efforts, we focus always on the same people. Now, we talk a lot about learning organization. Learning is a huge part of Agile. When you look at the iterative process, when you look at growth, you look at evolution, learning is fundamental. And our organizations need to learn paradoxically, they need to learn to learn. It's all about not just measuring, but also going back to those measures and understand what they mean, understand what we've done, understand what we shouldn't be doing anymore. Uh, it's also thinking about the organization as a system with its own property. So in systems thinking, which somehow in England now is a buzzword. Systems thinking is just another way of analyzing how the work happens through the organization. What is the relationship between value that we produce and waste that we create? And it's all about taking this understanding and doing something about it. And so it becomes really, for me, it became the basis of a fairly, I don't know, for me, it's a fairly interesting question is, what can we do? If we know that psychologically and historically organizations are primed for not changing, for not being agile despite, proclaiming agility, what can we do? And so I realized that, and I have no idea how I'm doing for time because we started really late, so I'll go really quickly. So if we start from accepting that every organization is based on intent, intent as an idea or the desire of doing something, then we can look at intent as a goal, as an objective, what we want to do. We all know that when the goal of the organization overlaps the goal of the team and overlaps the goal of the individual, this is where the magic happens. So how can we make sure that these things effectively come together? That what I come in to do every day matches what you come in to do every day and matches what the organization wants and hopefully even what our customers want. So I started reading a few things, and I like this idea of designing our evolution, transformation as design of evolution. There is some really interesting work done in the space of DDOs, deliberately developmental organizations, so organizations that set themselves up for learning. And so this is one way of representing them. You've got an edge, which is where you're future forward, and you learn things and you elaborate on them. You've got a home where you can feel safe. We heard a lot about trust and emotional safety, where you can be the best professional that you can be, but you also find support. And you've got a groove where you learn, you have your foundation. But I also started looking at how that impacts the individual on an individual level. And if we want to be leaders in this transformation, what that might look like. Now, I understand that the slide is not very visible, but effectively, we're looking at personal proficiency and leadership along two axes, strategy to, so long-term strategy to near-term operational, and the focus from the individual to the organization. Now, because we do know that organizations are like their schemas, understand them really well, understand numbers really well, I took an organizational psychologist equation for talent, which talks about competence, commitment, and contribution. So the right person at the right place with the right time, the right skills. A value proposition, so an exchange of commitments. In exchange for your time and expertise, what do I give you and what are you giving me? And meaning, so if you remember Maslow, that self-actualization at the very top. And I took this canvas that I'm sorry, I'm making terrible noises. This canvas that I did not make, but that a friend of mine, one of the principles of Agile Reloaded in Italy developed, overlapped the two things and mapped them against these same axes. And I started seeing how I could quantify for my organization what the contributions that could be expected were. So I looked at what the individual can contribute and what the system needs, and then looked at the contribution as insight, your skills, and the need of the organization as the foresight, direction of travel, to combine insights that could be used meaningfully. So as I said, I mapped this equation to the canvas, and we've started having conversations in terms of the skills that we need, the difference that we want in our player, in our team members, so that when we look at deploying squads, when we look at bringing in a new coach, we can get the diversity that we need. And our teams finally can be teams of all players and can deliver and can score the goals. To wrap it up, this was a really, really quick foray into why transformation fails, how can we start thinking about different things. I wanna give you a couple of things to reflect on. When people don't understand how they fit in an organization and what their contribution goes towards, they back themselves into a corner and do not want to participate. And you cannot see who this sentence is from, but this is from someone who is redesigning the voting system in the States. Dana Chisnell. If you take something away, remember that everything is connected, and to consider the system, and this is especially for those that develop software. Remember that when you are releasing, that release is tied back into something much, much bigger. Do not make these changes in isolation. I have no idea what happened here. Commit to transparency, work in the open your data, help see, create that context that they also need, and foster this idea that learning has to be continuous. We can never stop. That iteration process that we use in delivery applies to everything else, especially to learning. And remember that this is your most important job. It doesn't matter what your role is. Every time a decision is made, if we don't understand exactly what the point of impact is, and could be multiple points of impact. They may not be right now, they may be in the future. If we don't do that, we're not doing our job right. And finally, promise, this is the last thing. Humans are the keys to absolutely everything. Thank you.